Hey guys, I just want to deliver a quick message before we start the video, and I would really appreciate it if you went on my channel and hit the big red subscribe button and turned on notifications to make sure you get an update every time I post a video and you will not miss anything. And back to your video. Thank you. Hello Legends of Today and the Future, this is TBB here, and I have a question for you. Have you ever wanted to develop your own game, your own Roblox game in fact, and you just have not known where to start because you get into the studio and all you see is something that's intimidating? Well, boy, have you clicked on the right video, because I will show you how to make your full-on Roblox game from scratch, starting from the base plate. Now first, it's gonna take a lot of scripting, and you're gonna need to get used to that, and a lot of building, so there is a lot of work ahead, but I promise you it is worth it. So sit back and enjoy the video. Okay guys, so the first step in making your game will be you have to go to roblox.com and go to the create tab, and you'll be brought into the creations tab where you can start making all kinds of content like animations, game passes, badges. They cost, your audio, meshes, ads, sponsor games. But today we're going to be focused on games because we're going to be showing you how to make a full-blown Roblox game, which is basically going to run like a mini game, like a mini games map, because I have two active games that I have developed by myself that are with my group. I'll leave the link to my group in the description, and you can come play those games, and I'll leave the link to a lot of the assets I use for this in the description as well. But yeah, so I'm going to be showing you how to make a game from complete scratch from the base plate. So stick around. Okay, what this episode is primarily dealing with is how to make the basic functions like your player stats and like health and when your player dies and currency. And yes, there will be a thing on you can make people purchase currency for Robux. I have quite a bit of Robux here. So the first step is you simply have to click the green obvious button that says create new game. Under this template thing, select the base plate. You could do flat terrain, but I recommend the base plate because we don't want terrain. So now then actually no, you can do like some of these like maps if you want. They don't have any scripting to them, I don't think, except the obby. So avoid the obby. So avoid anything from here on, and the racing, don't do that one either. But like village, castle, suburban, city, base plate, flat terrain, you can use that. But I'm going to use the base plate. We're going to head over to basic settings. I'm just going to name this tutorial game because it's a game. It's going to be for you. It's just a tutorial. I'm not going to make this public. In the description, I'm just going to call it tutorial. I'm not going to make it public either. And genre, I'm not going to set it. Access, so for you might want to call this your game name right here, and then put a temporary description in there while it's private. Access, it's not going to be public, so I'm just going to remove tablet and phone. For you, if it's going to be like fighting, console might not be permitted because there is a lot of I don't know why this is, but there's a lot of criteria that you have to meet if you want your game to legally be for console. So it can't have any blood and gore and intense violence, and mine is going to be a gun game, so it will not meet this. There is none of this. This is the only thing it violates, so we're not going to be using console. Player count, I typically like to do 12. For the server fill, leave that as is, and VIP servers, I'm going to turn that off. It's not going to be an all-around. It's not going to be a public game. So then you want to click on, make sure you just do a check over that everything's good, and just click create game. Because by the way, once you created the game, Roblox is kind of dumb on the behalf of the fact that you can't delete it. So you technically already have your game, but that's not the point of this tutorial. We're going to actually make a game that people can play for fun. Then you want to go under configure. So this is the first step. And see this right here, enable access to studio API services. We're going to check that box. because that's very crucial that we have that checked, because we're going to be using data stores and the marketplace service, and we're going to want that to be available. Developer products, we'll come back to here. Game updates, I recommend staying away from that because you can only do once a week. So after this, we're going to hit save, and then we can go back to the create because we're pretty much done in the browser for now. So once you have created your game, you've configured it to the most optimal settings, you want to click the big button. Well, not big button. You want to click the button that says edit, because this is our first step in opening the game up in Roblox Studio. Now, if you do not have Roblox Studio, I recommend you have that installed. Actually, no, you have to have that installed because you can't make games otherwise. It's actually a game engine. However, it's only for Roblox, so just because it's a game engine doesn't mean you just can't make independent desktop games with it, unfortunately. Because if it was, I would so be making like independent games with it. So when you get into Roblox Studio, you're going to see your base plate. You might have a full blank screen for me like this. Well, not like a fully, just like a viewpoint or your camera basically. So it's your visual editor. If you have any tutorials on this side, close them. Just close everything except for this main game tab here. So I'm going to go through a run through everything. This right here, the cloud, this is your game. This right here is your axis. You can correct to different axes on here. That was recently added in just a couple updates ago, so it's a kind of a new feature. Right here is your emulator, so you can fit it to different screen sizes. Like right now I have it set to 1920 by 1080. There's also like tablets, desktops, phones, so like you can simulate an iPhone 6, iPad mini. It's pretty cool, so you know what your game looks like across every screen. I really like this, but I'm going to set it to HD 1080 just because I just like this to be my default when I click on the emulator. But I'm going to turn that off, and we're going to go through a rundown of what all of this on the home tab means. Okay, so select means you're going to select your parts. You can freely move them around with that as long as they're independent. Otherwise, you're going to drag the whole model with it. The move tool will make it so you can move your parts. It's nothing too special. It's basically going to pop up with some arrows going in each axis direction so you can move it around. Scale, of course, changes the size. And rotation, of course, rotates the part. And to make a good game, you are going to need some good building skills. However, if you are just hopeless when it comes to building, I recommend going into the toolbox right here, and you can search up all kinds of different stuff. Like we have a bunch of assets here for models, like observation tower, pine tree, dynamic light pole. Like all these things I've used in some of my games, not all of it, but like the crates, the propane tanks, all of these, because not everyone's going to want to go through the effort of building every single little frickin' thing that they see in their game, and I'm not like that either. So I am going to close out of that. I'm not going to be using it. Model, this is basically your same thing as what was on home. It's kind of home is kind of a rundown of everything. This is basically dealing all with parts and basic services, like insert part. That was on here. Part is, it simply just sticks down a real part into your game, and that's what you build from. But we don't need that right now. UI, that inserts a GUI. We are going to be using a lot of that, but let's add like UI elements. And I use that function. I actually don't use it from here. I just go and I use it in the Explorer. Material, you can change the material. You can do this all from here, but personally, I do not like doing it from up here. The only thing we're going to be using is like play, these four: toolbox, part, color, and game settings. And we're going to click on game settings. This is where you have more options on what your permissions are. You can change your game icon, your game thumbnails. You can switch your access stuff here too if you want. Under who can play this game, if it's a group game, it's going to say public, group, and private. But this one I'm just creating as a tutorial to my account only, so it's just going to say, or if it's to your account, it's going to be public, friends, and private. I'm doing mine private, so only developers, anyone you've shared this with, or only you can go in it. Unless you're in a group, then it's only your group admin. Avatar is basically, you can choose to, like this right here, avatar type. If it's anything other than player choice, it's going to force something on them. So right now it's going to be all R15 characters. So if anyone joins, if they're normally an R6, it's going to force them in R15. Um, Animation, player choice. So that means that their walk animation is going to be whatever they want, and collision is going to be outer box collision. Now this is your force height. You can force your height. You can set a range for it, or it can be something that you specifically want to set. Here's anything. If you want them to you want them to be forced to wear a certain outfit depending on what they're doing, you can click these and they'll be wearing something like give the ID from the catalog, and they can wear it in the game. You click on the following things. These two right here, Explorer and Properties, make sure they're on the right hand side, and then Output. Those are the three main things you want. So we're going to go back into the home, and I'm going to go on a rundown of what these things are right here. So workspace is anything your player can physically see in their game. Players takes care of all of the players logged onto your game, and it will save their stats and anything you want to have saved. Lighting, that's visual effects. Replicated first, I will go back to that. Service or replicated storage, sorry, is it's storage that's basically replicated amongst every client, as you can tell by the little icon it's represented by. So own unique version will be replicated to each client and will be accessed. Server script service is a server level scripts. Basically your big scripts are going to go here, like what would it be? Your main game, your leaderboard, all those types of things. Maybe reward codes, daily rewards. Server storage, that's like replicated storage, but it's only on the server level. It's not replicated. Everyone's going to be sharing from the one. Starter GUI, these are all replicated to the player and will be sent straight to this right here when they join. Starter GUI will be turned into player GUI when a player joins. So it's basically anything within this folder will be replicated and stuck in every single player that joins the game. Starter pack, so that's the same thing, except it's any single tool in there will be replicated to the player when they join the game. However, when they die, they will not respawn with it. That is what starter gear is for. Starter player, we're going to be going in here shortly. It's basically scripts and important things that you want to have put on the player when they join, and they will stay there. And teams, that's just literally like those teams that might appear along your leaderboard. Sound service, don't use this. Localization and test, don't mess with those. Chat, that I stuck something in here with an edited chat setting scripts with down on line 26 and 27, set this to true. So you can get your bubble chat. Under starter player, we're going to start with we're going to do something. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to make it so if a player hits shift, they can get a little bit of a speed boost, so like a sprint. I recommend going under, you could go under starter player, but you might have to type it up a little different. Going under starter characters where I go, because it mainly affects their character, and you're going to insert a local script. Now what a local script does is it's the script that is only effective on client level like functions. So the client, okay, so there's two elements to your game, client and server. Client, that's the player, deals with their character, what they see on their screen, on all that types of stuff. Usually GUIs are dealt with on client level stuff. Server, that's like leaderboard, game functions. It's all unified onto one server level, kind of like how replicated storage works and server storage. So anything that's going to be locally changing just for them is going to be a local script, because we're doing a sprint. So when they press shift, we want it to affect only the player that is pressing the sprint key or the shift key. So we're going to start by making a comment on top. Well, you don't have to do this, but I recommend doing this for it looks more professional, it looks more organized. So by hitting 2 dashes, and that starts a comment that the script will not read. It's basically fake line. It's basically for you to read or for you to reference something. If you want it to be multiple lines, you can do 2 dashes, 2 brackets. So now anything inside here will be fake code. But I'm just gonna do 1 line, so it's gonna be 2 dashes, and I'm gonna do our variables here. So I'm just gonna type required variables. I haven't been scripting for that long. It's only been a couple months. I actually managed to learn learn Roblox's script language, and it's really not that hard. It is very case sensitive, but you don't have to add semicolons at the end of everything, or you do have to do the brackets. You don't usually use brackets that often, and when doing if and else statements, you don't have to use the curly braces. So yeah, you don't have to do those. So now under the script, we're going to call this script player sprint, and just hit enter. So now it's called player sprint. We're going to quick close out of this, and we'll come back to it. We're going to go to file settings, and it's going to be under studio. Go down to script editor. Your default font is going to be Courier New. You can stick with that. I kind of started getting I started falling into the liking of what Microsoft Visual Studio uses. They use Consoles. So basically, make sure auto indent is set to true, because it's going to make your life a whole lot easier if it is. And I'll show you how that works. And then script editor colors, I recommend just leaving it as is. The background is basically it's of pretty much black. You can darken it. I might actually darken it a little bit, see what that does. Built-in function color, that's going to be blue. What that means is anything that is like your main keywords, well, not your main, but your built-in. So built-in function is anything that the engine is using that's only local to the engine. So like, let's say you're using Lua in Corona. This is probably not going to apply, but so yeah, that's what that is. Comment color, that's gray. It's basically what we were having. If you're using the white theme, it's going to be green. I actually might set it to a green instead, so it's a little bit more visible. So we're going to set it to a green, kind of like that. Error color, leave all these alone. Keyword color, that's basically the color of your main words, like that is functioning through all Lua. So that's what you want that. Under studio, stay under here. Under theme, you can go dark or you can do light. I like dark personally, it looks a lot better. So we're going to close out of this. Some of these changes, the changes that you made just now, if you did any with me, are not going to need a restart, so we can just hit restart later. But we're going to go back into our script. So now we notice a little bit of a change here. So I changed this to green so it could be seen a little better. And we're going to make our first variable, and you do that by typing local. So local basically means local variable, local to your script, and it's local to the area. So anything that is child to this will be able to use this variable. So we're going to do local player. It's very basic. Now that we're using and make sure that you do space equals space. You could just do equals, but it looks really ugly doing that way, so I do like to add a space there. And so the variable player is equal to game.players. So now we're accessing the players up in here. And now because this is a local script, we can simply single out the player we want by doing local player. So now it's the client we're looking at. So it's the player on this client that we're going to target. After doing so, we're going to make another variable, local user input service. Make sure there's never a space in your variables, by the way, because that is a sin. It will not work. It will be classified as 2 different variables, or there might be a script error. So user input service is equal to game colon get service. So we're going to get a service that might sometimes is among here and sometimes it's a little beyond what it is, and in quotations. So string brackets, or you can, it's basically with quotations you're making a string. We're going to want to search for the user input service. So now the user input service is retrieved whenever we use the variable user input service. So now we're going to do our sprint functions. Actually, okay, so wait, I deleted that. We're going to go down here and we're going to define our functions for our sprinting. So down here we're going to type function start sprint. So now we just created a function start sprint, and inside here we're going to type two parameters are automatically generated, and you must know what they are. So for this, it's input and game processed. Make sure it's not just game, because that will break. And then hit enter, and notice how it stuck this little end right here. That's because of the auto indent feature, and it stuck me indented one. So that's why I like auto indent. So now we're going to type if. So we're going to make an if statement, input dot key code. Make sure this is capital C and or capital K and capital C. So if their button input, so key code is basically each button on your keyboard has its own key code. If it's equal to, so equals enum. So we're accessing, I don't even know what enum stands for, but it deals with a lot of basically user inputs marketplace. It's a go-to for certain things. Key code dot left shift. So if their key code is, so if the button they're pressing is left shift, so then type then. That's one thing I like about Lua, is that you don't have to have curly braces after the if statement. You can do then and end is very comprehensible. We're gonna do it now. We're gonna get into a for loop. So for I is equal to 1, starting from 1, ending at 16. Do. Now we're gonna want to do a humanoid is equal to player dot character, because by the time they're pressing shift, they're probably gonna have their character by then. So we don't need to do a wait for child, and then colon find first child humanoid. So basically what this means is going to find the first child in the player called humanoid. So humanoid, so it's gonna, so colon find first child means find the first child inside character or whatever's before it. Now we're gonna do humanoid, so we're gonna use the variable we just used, and the player variable was just defined. The player variable was just defined up here. Now we're going to be using we used it here, and we're gonna use humanoid down here. So humanoid, we're gonna actually go down one more line. So humanoid dot walk speed equals humanoid dot walk speed. So what this means is going to be equal to what it was. Right now it's equal to what it is, so this won't do anything, but we're going to do plus 0.5. So it doesn't give them a huge boost, but it gives them a little bit of a boost. So what it means is it's going to take the humanoid dot walk speed, and it's going to check to make or it's going to take what it was, and it's going to add 0.5 for every interval from 1 to 16. So it's basically going to be added, 0.5 is going to be added on 16 times. Well, 15 times. So now this is our start function. Nothing happens though because it's not connected, but we're going to make our end function. So we're going to drop to function end sprint. And now in our parameters, we're going to do the same input and game processed. We don't use the game processed, but it still needs to be there. So if input dot key code is equal to the left shift, then okay, so for I, we're gonna do the same thing, is equal to 1 to 16. Do we want to find the humanoid again. So humanoid, it's the same as above us for now. So same thing as above, make sure there's no spelling errors, because anything beyond the first subject in the variable, so whenever you're doing a search, usually the first thing is either going to be a variable or this is basically a predefined or a user-defined start position for something. Otherwise you might use like script or game or workspace, but it's going to be player, and it won't know if there's an error anything beyond this player, so it doesn't debug like that. The only errors that it senses is like grammatical errors, so if I added a line there and dropped down, it would probably sense an error because this is not C# or C++, so we're not doing that. So back under here, we're going to go humanoid.walk speed is equal to humanoid.walk speed minus 0.5. And now I notice a lot of bugs with this, so I've taken a precaution. So after this, we're going to add another if statement. If humanoid, so actually we're going to take this variable now. We're going to copy this, delete, Control C, we're going to delete it from here. And we're going to do this. Now this orange highlighting means variable is undefined. It is defined here, but local. It's local, so that means it's local to only this for loop. So we're gonna put it inside of this input thing. So now it's redefined, and we can reach it anything inside of this key code if statement. So we're just gonna drop one to make it look nice. We're gonna go back here. If humanoid.walk speed is less than 16, which is default, then so we want to make sure, because this tends to glitch, like if someone has a speed coil or they're pressing shift during the start of the game, they might set their new default, it might go back to 16 while they're pressing shift. Now if they let go, this command's going to run and it's going to suck their speed basically down to 0. So now once they let off shift, they can't move. So if it ever goes under the default, we're going to set it just back to the default. And this will run after the for loop. So it's basically a check. So walk speed is just equal to 16. So if it goes under 16, we're just going to instantly correct it. So that should be our sprint script almost done. So under here, we're going to want to connect our functions to events. So we're going to go back up here. Actually, no, we already have it defined. So user input service dot input began. So if anything on the mouse keyboard is pressed, we're going to connect a function. So connect, and inside these brackets, just type the name of right here, start sprint. So, and you can delete those right there. So what that means is when this event happens, it's going to connect this function up here. And we're going to do the same thing for when they let off the button. So user input service dot input ended colon connect. We're going to do end sprint. Just like that. So now if they let up of a key, it's going to connect end sprint, and every time you press a button and let up a button, this is going to fire, but it might not always go inside because the key code is not always going to be left shift. So that's the end of this script. I will simply close out of here, and we will give it a test. We're simply going to wait for our character to load in. So as you can tell, we're walking. We press shift and we start running. See? We'll do a third person view here. So I'm running, or I'm walking. I press shift. Now I'm running, and I let go. I'm walking again. So the player script that we made is successful, and we don't want to fall off the edge. Okay, so that's the end of that step. I'll get back to you shortly on the next step. Okay, if you just typed up that past script with me, congratulations, you're practically a Roblox scripter. Woohoo. So now you can go flex on all your friends that you're able to script stuff. Probably won't remember a single thing, but hey, you can still flex that you're now a programming nerd. So now we're going to get into our leaderboard, and that is a server level thing, and it is always going to be running and is going to be a priority. So it's going to be stuck in server script service up here. So we're going to click the plus button. We're going to click on script. As you can tell, they do not allow local scripts because this is not a client level thing. We're going to delete this default text, and we're going to put down our service variables, because by now you should know what variables are. We can change what it says up there later, so we're going to do local. Data store service. We're gonna set it equal to game : get service. It's pretty intuitive when it comes to these high level things. Well, not high level, but like not very deep digging. Data store service. So it's gonna call upon the data store service whenever we use this variable. And we're gonna get a data store. So local player stats. So we're just going to call the variable player stats, it could be anything you want technically, is equal to data store service. We're going to call upon the line above us, and we're going to get a data store. And now name your data store, because it doesn't exist. Whenever you hit get data store and there's a name that is not already there, it's going to create one. And now if it's already there, get data store is just going to retrieve it. So we're going to call it player stats. Simple as that. So we're actually going to switch this instead of service. So it's going to be data store service and data store variables. So yeah. Now we're going to drop and we're going to make some more variables that are outside of this category. So we're going to do their extra variables. I kind of like to keep it as nice and organized as possible. It looks a lot nicer this way. We're gonna name our currency. We're gonna do this so we don't have to make. It's gonna save the length of some of our script lines. So now this, it's not actually gonna name the currency off the bat. This is just so we can search for it. We're gonna think of what we want the currency name to be called. I'm just gonna call it coin, because it's gonna be basic. I'm not publishing this game. I'm just doing this for you guys. Local default coin. This is going to be referenced when anyone's joining. Do we want any? I'm gonna set my default to 0 because I don't want them to have any. Because I'm mean that way. Actually, just kidding. Maybe I'll do 500. So let's start with 500. Local players left. We're gonna start it at 0 because anytime the server starts, it's gonna be 0. We're creating that variable because we need something to reference when there are very little amounts of players left and the server is going to shut down. This is kind of in there as a step to make sure that no one gets cheated out of their currency. So let's say they're going to save, but then the server shuts down before it can be finalized. That's why we're putting that in there. Now we're going to do our player join and leave functions. So we're gonna do game.players. So now we're accessing the players again. Now we're gonna wait for the event player added. So whenever someone joins the game, we're gonna connect it to a function. So we're gonna, instead of making the function predefined, we are going to just stick it right in there to avoid an error. And once you connect a function, make sure it's going to put your cursor right there, stick a open bracket in there, because now we need to define our function parameters. And whenever a player joins, a function parameter is generated that is going to represent the player that just joined your game. And we're going to give it a name, and we're going to give it a very comprehensible name and a pretty obvious name. We're going to call it players, or player. I can't type. I can't type fast. I try to look cool, but it doesn't work. And after that, you're gonna don't choose any of these suggestions, because that will ruin the script. Hit enter. That broke it. We're gonna hit enter now. So now this ending parenthesis here, it belongs to this connect. So anything inside of here is gonna be part of this connect. So it's gonna connect whatever's in here. Now these two brackets are for the function. And we're gonna go back over here under the script. We're gonna call it Leaderboard. Just like that. So it's our leaderboard script. It's going to be named. So when they join, we're going to make some variables. So make some local variables that are local for this. Coin key is equal to, so we're going to do the player that we just defined in the function, dot user ID. So we're going to want to get something that's unique to them, which is going to be the user ID. And now we're going to use a concatenation. And what a concatenation is, it puts two things together. Like, you basically use it if one of two things in your string is going to be varying. If it's both going to be varying, still use it. If the two things are going to be the same no matter what, don't concatenate and put them in the same string. So by doing this, you put two dots. So that means it's going to be concatenated. Now we're going to put our constant string. It's going to be, we're going to put a dash, and we're just going to put coin. So this is going to be logged in the data store when I tell it to. So it's going to put the player's user ID, and it's going to connect it, because this is always going to change depending on the player, and then it's going to put this constantly throughout. So it's going to be in the data store, there's going to be a list, and it's going to say coin, 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 and there's going to be a bunch of different player user IDs in there. So now we're going to do our win. We're going to have a win count, and we're going to have a coin count. So we're going to do victory key is equal to the same thing, player.user ID, concatenating it to wins, like this, just like that. And now we're going to drop two lines. Players left. So players left is equal to players left plus 1. So whenever someone joins, we want to increase that players left variable so that it's always up to date. And now we're going to create our currencies. So we're going to do local. We want to create the folder inside the player when they join that will hold all of the currencies. So leader stats is equal to, and now we're going to use a thing called instance.new. So what that means is going to create something. It's going to create an instance. In this case, we're going to tell it what we want it to create. We want it to create a folder. So it's going to create a new folder, and we're going to put a comma. And the instance parent, as you can tell, is right next to it. So we want it to be parented to the player, which is going to reference the player that just joined by the function. So it's going to stick a new folder in the player. Now we're going to use leader stats. Leader stats dot name. So we want to name it. When it's created, it's going to be called leader stats. No capitals anywhere. Otherwise it will not work. And that's all for that line. We're going to drop two lines. Local coin is equal to another instance. Instance.new. Now we want to create an integer value, because it's going to be logging an integer value. We're going to parent it to leader stats. So it's going to be put inside the folder. Coin dot name is equal to coin. So we're going to just call it coin. So when it's created, it's going to be called coin and not integer value. Because if you left that, if you did not put that line in there, it would simply just create something and it would be called folder, or it would be called integer value depending on what the instance. We're going to create we're going to do value. So coin dot value, not archivable, value. It's going to be 0. So this default coin will override it, but whenever inside here you want to do 0, just in case it's overridden and it might be double stacked on top of the default coin. And now we're just going to want our wins. We're going to create it. So local wins is equal to another instance. We're going to create another integer value because you want to count them. And if you don't want to count their wins, you can just leave this out, this little part here out. And we're going to parent it to leader stats. We're going to child it to leader stats. So leader stats is the parent. Wins dot name is equal to we're going to say wins. And now wins dot value is going to be 0 because you don't join the game if you're new with any wins, because that just doesn't make sense. Put another function in here. So player dot character added. So when their character spawns in the workspace, we're going to connect another function. And inside here, you just put a character. It's pretty self-explanatory. So if there's a player added, put player. If there's a character added, put the player, because now, or character, now it's going to represent, this parameter represents the character that was just added. So we want to trigger this only when they die. Character, actually we're going to do a variable, local, we're going to do the same thing as humanoid. Local humanoid is equal to, and now we don't need to use player because character is now already defined, so we can start with character, colon, find first child. I apologize for my crappy typing. Humanoid. And now what a humanoid is, I didn't explain this before, it basically regulates your player. It's like their soul, or it's like their inner body. Like with you, you only have you as a human, and I'm actually talking about not your player, but you only have so much stamina, you only have so much life left as you get old. But this basically is kind of like the same thing. It regulates health, maximum health, jump power, walk speed. That's what we were accessing it for the sprint. And so now we're going to do humanoid.died. So when the health reaches 0, we're going to connect another function. And this we're not going to leave, we're not going to put any parameters in here. We're going to delete this actually. Not that we're going to delete that line, or that empty line. So when they die, humanoid.walk speed. So this is also going to prevent the glitch alongside the sprint script. So the default walk speed for Roblox is 16. So just set that there. Unless you have any intentional default walk speed, you can increase that, but you have to do it in the other script as well. So we're going to set their walk speed back to normal. And now in our game, we're going to do if character colon find first child. And in here, when we're typing up our game script, we're going to use something to identify the player as in the game when in the round, called game tag. So if they have a game tag when playing, so if they die and this game tag's found, so that means they're no longer in the round, so they're going to be respawned at the lobby. So we're going to set this to, we're going to do character. So now we know they have the game tag, so we can just do .game tag colon destroy. So it's going to just delete it off the character. So that means now they can't be identified. Actually, we're going to finish our join script. We're actually going to leave this here for now. We're going to go here, and we are going to start just building a quick lobby. I'm going to quick mention this. We're going to use our base plate as the start of our lobby. We're just going to name it ground. Under brick color, so we're going to use our properties tab under brick color. We're not going to change that. We're going to do color. We're going to set it to something kind of nice like this. And on the surface, you see these studs, they're kind of ugly. We're going to get rid of them. Go down to surface. Go under, see this inlet, so we're going to change this to smooth, and top surface, studs, that's what you're seeing right now. We're going to change it to smooth. Completely fixed. So now, we can also change the material of this. So we're going to go under material, and we're going to do fabric. That's what I'm going to do, because now you got this nice kind of carpet texture everywhere. But this base plate is huge, am I right? So we are going to change this under size. You could use scale, but I want it to be a little bit more precise on position. So size, I'm going to do just like, I'm going to do a simple 150 by 5 by 150. So it's 150 wide and 150 long, and it's 5 thick. So hit enter. That should take care of all of that. So now we're just going to use a simple ground as our lobby for now. I won't build on it at all. And we're going to go under model, and we're going to hit spawn. So now that we have this, click on the top, so you have this little thing. It's going to reveal the decal, hit backspace to delete it. So now we have it's a spawn location, so we're going to do move. Or actually, no, we're going to hit select. We can move it freely. We're going to join it. It's going to be joined to the thing. We're just going to put it in scale. We're going to scale it down a little bit to make it relatively still square. And we're going to take this joint and destroy it for now. We don't want that. We're going to take this spawn location, do Control D to duplicate it. We're going to go under Move. We're going to move these spawn points. I'm going to put 6 of them in here. So I'm going to space them out a little bit. Try to make them as even as possible. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's going to do for now. So now we have these. We're going to click Shift, or click on the top one, Shift click on the bottom one. So it's going to select all of them, hit Control G to group them into a model. We're just going to call it player spawns. It's not going to be accessed by anything, so the name doesn't really matter. We're going to delete all these joints because they're not needed. And under this, we're going to group these into something. We're going to call it lobby. So there. Here's our lobby. Boom. Now we're going to make those spawn points not visible. So under this, we're going to go under, we're going to click all these spawn points. We're going to go under behavior, anchored, make sure that's true. Can collide, turn that off. So what that means is any player is not going to be able to walk on it. They're going to be able to walk through it. So it's not going to be any physical disruption. And then under transparency, set that to 1. So they're see-through. So now they basically have spawn points that the players can't see, and it's beautiful. So we're just going to minimize that because it's not important. Go back to our leaderboard. We're going to go back to scripting. So we're almost done with the join function. In the next episode, I'll finish up the script, and I will start the game script. So we're going to start dealing with getting the player's save data. So now this tends to be really glitchy, and data stores are not stable by Roblox. Well, they are quite stable, but there is a long history of problems dealing with those. So we kind of all of us scripters learn to put them in P calls. What that means is if there is an error inside of this P call, it will be quarantined, and the entire script will carry on as if it's ignored, and it will just ignore that function inside. So P call function. So this function, it's going to run. It's under P call, so that means as soon as it's called upon, it's going to run. And this is all going to be inside the P call. So if it breaks, the script's going to carry on as normal, but the error will be quarantined. So we're going to do local coin or player coin data is equal to player stats. So we're going to access the variable for the data store, and we're going to get their save data. So we're going to do get async, and make sure you spelled that right, not S-N-Y-K. I made that error before and it completely broke it, and I have an extra A. So get async, we're going to put brackets, and we want to simply just reference their key, which we have already predefined up here. So we're going to do coin key. And we're going to do the same thing with the wins. We're going to do player wins data is equal to player stats, colon get async, and we're going to get the victory key. So now it's gonna call upon this, and it's gonna look for that. So now we're gonna do a print. We're gonna want it to print something in the output, and it's gonna do so if the P call is accessed, getting saved data. We're gonna make it look like a bot, so we're gonna put 3 dots or ellipses. So we're going to look if there is player coin data. So if they could find an entry with your player, then coin dot value. So we're going to access the coin that was made up here is equal to player coin data. So when we make the save function, which we haven't made, it's going to save the integer. It's going to save this, and then beside it is going to be the amount that we save, and it's going to find that amount and if they can find an entry for any of these amounts, it's going to, well, in this case, player coin, it's going to load there. It's going to set when they join. It's going to make all these instances, but it's not going to have anything. But they're going to look, and it's going to find it, and it's going to set it to what they had saved. And we're going to go in here. We're going to do else. So if they couldn't find it, we're going to do coin.value is equal to default coin. So if they can't find an entry for your player, we're going to just set you off with what you have when you first join without any previous entries. Now we're going to click here. By the end, we're going to drop down to, we're going to do if player wins data. So if we can find their wins, then. So now you can probably guess what we're going to put. We're going to do wins.value is equal to player wins data. And then else wins.value. We don't have a default wins, but we're just going to set it to 0 because they don't have any when they join. So there's that. Now under that, we're going to drop under this, and we're going to do another print. So if all this code above ran successfully, we're going to say saved or data or data loaded successfully. I think that's how you spell it. And there we go. So now this is your script. So now we're going to do a test, and we're going to find our value. So what this is going to do is when I join, it's going to start me off with the default amount. So we're also going to look in this output down here too. Okay, as you can tell, it logged our save data, and it was fine. Oh, sorry, it didn't log, but it was trying to get our save data, and it loaded it successfully. So you can tell there was no error within this code up here. And now that we're in here, of course, we didn't have anything. So it set us off with the default coin and no wins, of course. So I'd say mission success. And as you can tell, when we spawned, of course, on one of the spawn points here in the world. So yep, that's the end of this episode. I'll catch you guys next time. Until then, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.